Welcome to this episode of Her Playbook. I am honored to be joined by a true legend and trailblazer in the sports broadcasting business, Hannah Storm herself. She's an ESPN anchor, she's an NFL play-by-play broadcaster, and she is the head of Brainstormin' Productions. Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today.
Oh, it's so great to be with you, and congratulations on the new podcast. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be able to tell so many great stories like yours. And I think, a lot is made about how to get a start in the business, right? How to get a start in broadcasting. But I'm really curious what the key of maintained success is. I mean, you've been to the top and stayed at the top of this industry for so long. What is the secret there?
That is such a good question. And it's really funny that you asked that today, because I was talking to Katie Couric and Lara Spencer about that last night, as a matter of fact. So two women who have had really, really long careers in the industry. And I think one of the keys is just really being open-minded to opportunities that come your way. I mean, you mentioned the NFL play-by-play. Amazon came to me 4 years ago and said, we'd love you to do play-by-play of Thursday Night Football with Andrea Kramer. And at first I was like, okay, that sounds terrifying. Like, I've never done NFL play-by-play, but listen, I think if you work hard enough and really put your mind to it and are willing to take risks, like, it's just important when those opportunities come along, maybe even things that you never thought of, to really engage with those opportunities, to say yes. So I think being open-minded and being willing to take risks are two really big keys.
Well, and you mentioned this opportunity with Amazon, right? 2018, you and Andrea Kramer became the first female duo to call an NFL game on Thursday Night Football. I mean, that is a huge honor to hold in the history books, but also stepping into a new realm of your career, like you mentioned, it's a little intimidating. Did you feel the weight of that? How did you approach that?
I definitely did, because I wanted to do it, but I wanted to do well. And the reason I did is because I wanted other women to get the chance to do that later. Now, we did 4 seasons at Amazon, so it was fantastic. It's sad to see it come to an end on a weekly basis. But we even called playoff games. So I think what was really important about what we did is that it was an entire season, right? It wasn't just one game. It wasn't just like sort of a gimmicky thing. It really was a season after season gig. So that was one reason why Andrea and I wanted to do it. And then we did it together, which was really nice, like to have that journey with another woman, right? And a really good friend and somebody that has the same work ethic. So we had each other to lean on. We actually had an all-female staff the first year, which was so cool too. So, I think it made history in a lot of ways. But for me, there's always that, I don't know if pressure is a good word, but this very heavy sense of responsibility to do a good job so that other girls who are looking at what you're doing, and executives who are looking at what you're doing, and fans, that they come to not only be comfortable with a woman doing something like play-by-play, they might aspire to do play-by-play, or they might be more willing to give the next woman a chance to do play-by-play, or the next all-female booth. I don't know when we're going to see that again in the NFL. I hope it's really, really soon. But, those things are really important. And there is a great responsibility that comes with that. And yes, there is pressure that comes with that, to be honest.
Right. Well, because representation matters, right? And the young girls out there who see a woman in that role, who think, wow, I could do that too someday, who maybe hadn't imagined that was a possible job for them. When you got started in your career in broadcasting, who did you look up to? Who did you say, oh, wow, this woman, or was there anyone in that space?
Well, since there weren't very many women doing sports at the time, right, which is your point, almost none, what I always keyed in on were the women who were doing the Olympics. So actually, that was Jane Pauley, right? So they would take all the women who were doing morning shows on the networks, and then they would usually send them to the Olympics. So those were the only women really that I associated with sportscasting. So I would say that Jane Pauley, for me, I was thinking about what do I want to do in my life? Like, what are my big goals? And one of them was obviously to be a sportscaster, to specifically do Olympics, of which I did 4 with NBC. Also to do a morning show, which I actually did with CBS for 6 years. So that was a really interesting, talking about longevity, an interesting like right-hand turn in my career, which was an incredible experience. And so, yeah, I guess Jane Pauley would be a good answer. And she's still on television. Talk about longevity.
That's some real longevity right there. I love to see that. I love to see that journey.
Yes.
I know that when you got your start in broadcasting too, you were doing a little bit of work as a radio DJ, as a broadcaster. I got to ask, Storm is a stage name that you came up with as a radio DJ. Did somebody else pitch it? How did that happen?
No, it's so crazy. So at the time, I had done internships in college. I had worked at TV stations. I went to Notre Dame. I was on the air at our local TV station. I mean, I did everything right. However, tough era, right? So I went out, we're talking like early 80s, and there were just no women sportscasters. So I literally sent out hundreds of tapes and resumes and just could not get a job. I mean, I was told I'll hire a woman over my dead body. My sports director won't work with a woman. Our audience, won't be comfortable watching a woman do sports. I mean, it was just on and on and on. And then my dad said, listen, you really only need one person to say yes. Like, just think about the odds that way. And then he said, there's a lot more radio stations in the country than TV stations. And I was like, bingo. So it was all about like the odds, right?
Right.
So I started answering want ads, which is what you did back in the day. And I answered one ad for a heavy metal radio station in Corpus Christi, Texas. I had done some DJing in college, and I'd also done a sports talk radio show. I loved music. And so I just went to a studio. I basically made up a tape, of myself DJing. I applied for the job. I got the job. So my real name is Hannah Storin. So I went down to Corpus Christi, and the program director there was like, well, your name is Hannah. There were not like any Hannahs back then either. So he was like, we're going to name you Anna Storm. And I was like, dude, I got to hang on to one of my names. Like, do you want the first name or do you want the last name? And so I was like, how about Hannah Storm? Like, will you just give me Hannah? And he was like, okay. And then I was on late at night. So I was on like from 10 at night to 2 in the morning, just spinning records. Like I said, it was heavy metal. It was like Headbanger era, Quiet Riot, Def Leppard, Scorpions, like back to back to back. And then they, Corpus Christi's on the water. So it was like Storm by the Sea, and In Comes the Storm. It was just like a really fun name to play with.
Yeah.
So subsequent jobs, like people have tried to change it back. They're like, no, it's going to go back to Storm. And like, it just like never has.
Never has.
And I don't know. I love it because it's like it's like a radio DJ name. And
it really is.
I don't know. It's fun. And that's, oh my gosh, that was the craziest job because our station was licensed in Sinton and Taft, Texas, which is like farm country. Mm-hmm. And so I had like my car with my CB radio, right? No cell phones. And I had to every night go to the gate of where the station was, and there were cows like everywhere. I had to get out of my Toyota Tercel and literally scare the cows away from the gate so that I could open the gate, quickly drive my car through, and close the gate before any cows would get onto the property. So that was my first gig.
That is incredible.
It's hysterical. Yeah. It's hysterical. And when the station broke down, I would have to literally crank it up by hand. I mean, go out and crank the station. So we had all sorts of crazy things.
Anyone out there complaining about what their first job asks of them, just like tune in right here. And at least you're not scaring cows away right now.
Yes. You're not chasing cows, which, by the way, do not scare easily. I just want to make that point.
That is amazing. Hannah Storm, she is so metal. That is what I love to hear it. Now,
hilarious.
You mentioned, though, that great piece of advice from your dad. Your dad, Mike Storin, he was a big person in sports, the commissioner of the ABA. He was a GM of several franchises. How much did his role in the world of sports kind of play a role in your sports fandom and your kind of pursuit of that career?
Yeah, I mean, he, I guess since you're a football person, you'll appreciate this. He also ran a team called the Memphis Grizzlies, and they were trying to get into the NFL during the expansion, and they had Zonka, Kick, and Warfield on their team. And Danny White was the quarterback, and he kicked. for the team. Is that hysterical? And
Wow.
like Elvis went to all the games. So it was hilarious. But anyway, it's just like a little piece of history, a little stop along my dad's way, because he was with a number of sports, primarily basketball, as you referenced, but there was also, the Houston Astros, there was the football, there was indoor tennis, which was like a thing back then.
Right.
And I just think as a woman and as a girl growing up, like I never would have thought of being a sportscaster had I not been around sports so much, because when it wasn't a school night, we were at every game of every kind all the time. We did move around a lot, which left me a little bit like a person without a specific team. Like I usually have several teams that I'm really attached to. But I just think that it opened my eyes to the possibilities of how fun sports was. And I was a real ham, and I kind of knew I wanted to go into broadcasting, but I was like, news? Like, am I going to go to like city council meeting or sports? I know that's fun. So I think because I loved it so much too, it made me really persevere through a lot of adversity. And the adversity kind of made me a little more stubborn. Like, no, this is what I want to do,
Right.
And so I just think growing up with a true love of it. And also what's really cool about it is I've been around athletes my whole life. So very not intimidated by athletes, and I don't look at athletes, I just look at them as I looked at them as like just part of our lives growing up. And I also appreciate what the front office goes through, right? And all the business side of sports, because my dad, we would lose a championship game, how devastating it would be, or he would make a move, to get a player and the owner didn't like it and he would fire my dad, so lots of those kinds of things happen. So I think it gave me a good perspective.
Absolutely. A really unique perspective to carry along.
Yeah, really,
through
right?
The way that you cover things as well, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
You've gone from being, a front-facing, on-air professional to also behind the scenes with your production company, Brainstorming Productions. How did that come about? How did you say, okay, this is what I also want to be doing? How do you have so much time in the day? I love this for you, but tell me everything.
No, I always joke because I'm doing right now, I've never done a series. And right now I'm producing and directing a 6-part series for Hulu.
Wow.
It is another full-time job, let me tell you. It is so much. But, I started back, I wrote a couple of books. I don't know, I've always been creative, but I also have this need to sort of create something that I'm in charge of, because I've always worked for huge companies, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Turner, whether it's CNN, whether it's NBC, CBS, Disney. So I've always worked for people, but I have personally needed that space where I can build my own team,
right?
And I can create something, with a group of people that I built from scratch. So yeah, I've done 7 films, a ton of branded content, and this series, and I have another one in development. We're actually shooting today and tomorrow. This really cool school in the Bronx about mathletes, which is so cool.
Wow.
But yeah, and my series for Hulu is super, super inspiring. All of my films are very aspirational, inspirational. They deal a lot with adversity and a lot with very tough issues like, race, gender identity, addiction, politics, so we deal with the tough issues, but in this really cool way of people who've overcome. And so I love it. I mean, you can tell by the way I talk about it. I just absolutely love it. And it is an insane amount of work. Here's what I do. I don't play golf. I do cook, but other than that, I don't have any other hobbies. I just raise my kids, work, and that's what I do. I don't know. That's what I think is fun.
Right, absolutely. And also the cooking, I have a lot of respect for, because I'm still trying to get that one down.
Oh, that takes a while. Don't worry, you're good. It takes a while. You got a whole life ahead of you with that. Yeah.
There we go. We've got time. Until then, there's delivery.
Yes, you're good. No, absolutely. Uber Eats. There you go.
But you mentioned too, raising kids, balancing being a working mother and a mom who is, number one, so prominent, front facing, and traveling and busy and all that. How do you balance that? How do you strike that?
Yeah, that's really hard, I think, because you're never completely happy. You know what I mean? If you're at work, I actually gave up covering Wimbledon because it was 3 weeks away from home. And, my kids were teenagers. I knew that they were getting ready to leave the house. And it was in the summer when they were off. And I was like, that was a really, really hard decision. I love tennis so much. I love Wimbledon with all my heart. And I just couldn't do it. So I would say I have definitely made some tough decisions. Like another thing is like the National Spelling Bee, right? I had the chance to do that. And it was my daughter's prom. And I think she's going to have 2 proms in her life, right? Like those are just 2 examples, but I have made choices every step of the way, changed careers, switched jobs. The reason I've done so much morning TV is because I always wanted to be there in afternoons for my kids' sports. But, then sometimes you have to make decisions the other way, right? Because of your job. And then that's just so hard, because you do miss stuff at home as well.
Right.
It cuts both ways. So you just got to try to find that balance. But I always, when I was able to make decisions, I really did always think first about, well, what's going to make me happiest? And that's being with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, balancing all that is tough for anyone. And I can imagine those choices are tough. But you've covered some incredible events over the course of your career. I mean, we've touched on Wimbledon, the Olympics, the NBA Finals, NFL. If there's a sporting event, Hannah has been there. Is there one that you think this was my favorite thing to cover? This was something that I would do over and over again if I could.
Oh my gosh. I honestly think like when I got to do my first Olympics, because I had wanted to do Olympics my whole life. So not only did I do that, but I had been on CNN and I went to NBC and I did Wimbledon and the Olympics back to back. And it was in Barcelona and it was the dream team. So can you imagine like what a cool Olympics that was to cover? So I always think back to that first Olympics. And I think that being in another country, being at such a big event, being at something I always wanted to do and had watched since I was a little girl, I think that was pretty unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, that's an iconic one in general. Yeah. The fact to be there is, wow, that's dear diary. That's a good one.
Yeah. And obviously my first love is basketball because of my dad and that. And then I covered all of Michael Jordan. I mean, think about that.
Right.
5 of his titles. NBC got the contract for his 5 for the last 2 of the first 3-peat and then the second 3-peat. And it was just unbelievable being able to cover his career. And then even my hometown Rockets got to slip in there and Michael went to baseball and win a couple times. And so that was really cool too. And my mom lived there and, that was, I think that era of the NBA was just so amazing. So amazing in the 80s, early 90s, just the stars and the quality of basketball and covering, being at all those games.
Right. And the way the sport
was really incredible.
Yeah. And the way the sport was like evolving and growing and changing at the time too.
It was. I mean, it started with Magic and Larry, and then, Michael Jordan took it to a whole new level. And obviously you had Patrick Ewing and you had, Charles Barkley, and so many great players. And then it evolved into like Shaq and Kobe. And it was pretty incredible. It really was.
That's an incredible journey as well. But, at this point, when you look back, is there something that you wish you knew or advice? If you could, take a time machine and give your younger self one piece of advice or one like, hey, you know what, this is what I want you to know as you embark on this path, what would it be?
So much of my career when I started out, I was really the only woman, or I was just representing whatever field I was in. I was one of one usually, doing what I was doing. And so I think because I had that personal responsibility in order to feel perfect, every time like I made a mistake, you know what I mean? I think I amplified it too much. So I guess if I had to look back and say, I would be like, you're okay. Yeah. Like, you're going to be fine.
It's going to be okay.
You're going to screw up. Everyone's going to screw up. We're all going to screw up.
Totally.
And it is just fine. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of your career. It's not the end of women in sportscasting. Like, you're good.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I would have told myself, to just chill a little bit.
Right? Because I feel like we're all our biggest critics at some point.
Yes.
On some level, at the early stages of your career, did that perfectionism kind of push you? Would you have kind of thrived as much without it? And at what point does it kind of say, okay, now I need to release this?
Well, I think that what that did was really hammer home to me, which is really simple about working hard. But I still over prepare for everything. I over prepare because it's the only way I can feel relaxed. So when I'm like ad-libbing and joking and blah, 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 blah in the air, doing an interview like you're doing now, like you're insanely prepared for this interview and it allows you to listen, which is the key to being a good interviewer. That's that drive. That's where that drive that you referenced came from. And so because like, look, I talk about taking risks. When my first full-time job was in Charlotte, they're like, can you cover NASCAR? I was like, what's NASCAR? Yeah, I can cover it, right? Yes. And so terrifying, right? But I was like, I'm not a stupid person, and I really know how to work hard. Like, I figure with anything, right? If you put any challenge in front of anyone, whether it's NASCAR doing NFL play-by-play, like whatever, it's producing, directing, like you can't be afraid because you can work hard enough to pull that off, to learn. And if you're just like have that kind of faith in yourself, like that's super, super important. But now that I really think back, I've done that over and over and over and over. Yeah. I mean, just gone into something that I just did not know, you know, or gone into something where it was just such a huge challenge. You know, I wasn't confident, but I'm like, listen, I'm not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid to do homework. I'm not afraid to ask people's opinions. You know, all of that it all kind of ties together. So that is what I took away is I still have an insane work ethic.
Which is, you know, I mean, my dad's going to love this because that's exactly what he would always tell me. He goes, over prepare and then wing it. And I think that is exactly,
and then wing it.
And then wing
that's
it.
True.
And that's like what I always said, you get relaxed and you're like, all right, I know what I need to know. I'm good with it. And that is what makes you a pro's pro, Hannah Storm. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on Her Playbook. Thank you for sharing part of your story. If you guys are out there watching, got to check out her new stuff on Hulu, Hannah on ESPN, on SportsCenter, all over the place, anywhere you can find sports and have ever watched sports. She has been. Hannah Storm, thank you so much for taking the time.
And I just want to say, like, you just gave a great interview.
Thank you.
I do. I mean, yeah, I'm like super impressed. And you are like a fantastic host for this series. So
thank you.
I mean,
so
keep it up. Really, much respect coming back at you.
That means the world to me. So thank you so much, Hannah.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I'm gonna cry. Hannah Storm thinks I'm good at my job. Thank you.
Yes.